What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Bro History. It's Henry Zamota and Danny Abdeljabbar. What's going on, brother? How are you?
Chilling, man. As per usual. How about yourself?
I can't complain. What day is it?
Thursday? I can't tell
Thursday?
sometimes.
I thought it was Friday. I guess what's happening to me right now is that um, you know, my calendar is all out of whack anyway right now because of coronavirus, just like everyone else. But the fact that we had Memorial Day on Monday
Mm-hmm.
has I have no idea what day it is, what hour it
Yeah.
is, where I am during this day.
Did you do
But I
anything
think it
cool
is
though for Memorial Day?
so interesting that you say that. I am apartment looking for places in Brooklyn,
Oh, cool.
so I'm moving. I'm moving within the next couple of months to Brooklyn, most likely
Coming to my neighborhood, huh?
coming to your neighborhood, leaving the Upper East Side, which I've been. So I've been up in this neighborhood since 2014.
Whoa, that's a long time. Six
No,
years.
actually longer than that, 2013. I've been in this apartment for about 7 years.
Whoa, big
This is
move.
where I spent the majority, or pretty much the vast majority, of my single bachelor life.
Mm.
And now that is all ending. I am moving to Brooklyn with my girlfriend, which should be interesting. But the good news is that there's going to be no sirens in the background anymore.
Ah, yeah, that's a good point. Well,
Well,
hopefully not. We don't know
not
yet.
as many sirens in the background because well, let's knock on wood. Hopefully, the place I move into does not have a hospital next to it.
Well, just make sure when you're talking to your realtor that you want to say no proximity to any hospitals.
No hospitals, no hospitals, no hipsters,
No
and they're going to be
hospitals, no
like,
hipsters. Yeah.
no hipsters in Brooklyn.
What are you talking
Why
about?
is, what are you talking about? This is all hipsters. How do you think a guy like me will fit in that neighborhood, in that neck of the woods,
Well, obviously
an Upper
Brooklyn
East Side?
is, yeah. I mean, Brooklyn is pretty big. Uh, by many accounts, I think it might be bigger than Manhattan. Um,
It
square
is
miles,
bigger,
yeah, square miles wise. So it really just depends on the neighborhood you go
and
to.
population wise too.
Yeah, just depends on the neighborhood you go to. Honestly, I think you'd fit in anywhere. Honestly, New York, for those who don't live here, we're pretty diverse set of people. Living pretty much shoulder to shoulder with everybody. So, you know, there aren't too many neighborhoods that you can go to and feel totally unwelcome or like an outsider or anything like that. Like it's just pretty normal.
My neighborhood right now is either young people in their 20s. I'm at the point where it's getting sad that I live with roommates. I'm at that point.
Yep, same.
Yeah, we're both at that point.
Same.
I'm 31, so
Yeah.
I just turned 31, so it's starting to get sad that I have two other
Adult
male
male
roommates,
roommates.
two adult roommates. So it's time to make that move. But where, just to give reference, the Upper East Side, it sounds kind of snooty. Like that's the reputation it has gathered over the many years.
Right.
Because back in the day, there was apartments that are buildings that didn't let like Catholics and Jewish people live in them. It's like super Anglo-Saxon,
Right.
but things have changed over the past 20 years where there's a lot younger. It's cheaper than other parts of the city normally were. Like as the Upper East, as a Lower East Side and different parts of Manhattan became more expensive, the Upper East Side lost as much as lost the demand that they saw in the past. So there's a lot of bros. Like there's a lot of bros, and there's a lot of spinsters, and then there's a lot of old people on rent control.
Yeah.
That's my
That's your
neighborhood in a
neighborhood.
nutshell.
Yeah.
A lot of new like young people in their 20s who are looking for a more affordable place to live.
Uh huh.
Uh, spinsters and old people who have been living in whatever building they live in for probably about 60 to 70 years.
Yeah. Yeah. My neighborhood is mostly like I'm on the cusp of a few different like cultures. So if you travel a few blocks one direction, it's just like a bunch of hipsters, and if you travel a few blocks in a different direction, it's mostly Hispanic, so Puerto Rican and Dominican mostly. And in a different direction, like the third direction, uh, it's like Hasidic Jewish people, and I'm pretty much in the center of all of that. So there's a lot of crossover that happens, and it's just super interesting to see all of those parties kind of interact with each other. It's only in Brooklyn.
Well, I'm on a crossroad too. I'm pretty close to the projects in Harlem.
Hmm.
Like I'm in a quick walking distance. But honestly, Harlem gets kind of a negative connotation nowadays. Harlem's really not that bad anymore. Like Spanish Harlem, where I lived near, it's actually pretty safe. Like last year, I was looking at my friend and I were looking at the statistics, and it wasn't. I'm not sure if it was last year or the year prior, but there was like not a single murder in that neighborhood for almost the entire year. And you're
Wow.
like, wow, this place has cleaned itself up. Since then, over the past year, there's actually been a couple of murders. However, it's relatively doing pretty well compared to how it was, in like the 90s where it was,
Yeah.
it was quite dangerous. But all right, let's start talking about the things that we need to get to on today's episode because
Yep.
there's a number of topics
Yep.
relating to our favorite beer,
Yep. Our favorite beer.
Corona. Did I tell you that I Corona people now? Did I
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
this on this
I
podcast
don't know if
yet?
you've said it on the podcast yet, but yeah,
I
tell
forgot if
people
I
about it.
always
Yeah.
forget. People say like, "Hey, remember when you said that on your podcast?" And I don't remember at all. Like if me saying something. But yeah, I Corona people, so I'll take a beer, a warm Corona, and I'll hide it somewhere. So kind of like an ice being iced. Everyone knows what being iced is, right?
Yeah.
But rather with a Corona, and I'll just be like, "Oh, you got Corona, bitch." Now that I say about it, I'm pretty sure I've said this on this podcast. But yeah, back to Corona.
Yeah.
Just
Well.
take the wheel for me. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
go
No.
off the road. Just take the wheel. Just take the wheel. I'm not
Sure.
going anywhere.
Sure. Well, actually, we don't have to go too far off topic because we were talking about New York City, and I wanted to start there. So, actually, CR here, one of our viewers, just asked the question. I wonder if murders went down with COVID. Funny enough, it has, but I've been hearing a lot of reports in Brooklyn of people getting shot, like especially like rappers. Like I've seen at least one article about some rapper in Brooklyn getting shot and killed, like every week. So I don't actually know what the stats are for that. I imagine that murders have gone down because like no one leaves their house anymore. Um,
People leave their house, man. There's more people out than ever right now.
well, now,
Not
but
right.
like
I
not
mean,
not in the
maybe a
height
couple
of
of
it,
months
you know.
ago, but now, I don't know if you saw pictures of like, I was by whatever Prospect Park the other day,
Hmm.
and it was pretty crowded.
Yeah,
It
no,
was pretty crowded. There was a lot of people out.
I feel like
Central
we
Park
knew
is
this
super
we
crowded.
knew this was going to be the case. As soon as it gets warm, everyone's going to go out. But something to to that point, there's kind of like a. I don't want to say that it's safe to go outside because I don't want to be misrepresenting facts that I don't have.
Fauci said it was safe to go outside.
Fauci said it's
So are you
cool,
saying
so we're
that
good.
Fauci? Are you saying our Lord and Savior Anthony Fauci is wrong? He said it was safe.
All right, if
He was like,
Fauci said it was
not
safe.
too much staying inside. What are you guys fucking stupid?
I think you were listening too much to
These
that Jimmy
fucking
Dore.
germs and shit are gonna kill you.
That Jimmy Dore episode was hilarious that you sent me. By the way, if you guys don't know, Jimmy Dore does these like fake phone calls, and he had this like priceless phone call from a fake like impersonator of Anthony Fauci, and it was hilarious. But okay, so back to the topic. So New York City is now, according to BuzzFeed News, so take it with a grain of salt, is now no longer the epicenter of United States coronavirus epidemic. As many have probably already heard, we've passed 100,000 coronavirus deaths in the country. But in the New York City metro area, which was previously the reigning champion for the highest concentration of COVID-19 deaths anywhere in the United States, which is also the country with the most deaths, from this disease in the whole world. Apparently, this is changing. Right, we're no longer as big an epicenter. So, the metro area, by the way, just to define what that is, it's the 5 boroughs in New York plus 18 nearby counties in New York, New Jersey, and in Pennsylvania, which accounts for just 6% of the United States population. So, if you were looking in mid-April at the death count, the New York City metro area had half of the country's coronavirus deaths, right? So that's just ridiculous, right? But by today, the deaths in the rest of the country have far surpassed New York City metro area. So, it looks like because of surges in other areas in the country, that championship title might be in contest. But also, we've been seeing a decline in number of new cases and deaths here in New York City as well. So take it as you will, but I guess it's safe according to Fauci. But that's something interesting to think about, because New York City definitely put on some, not police state laws, but they definitely closed down a lot of businesses, and they've been pretty tough about the lockdown by many standards. If you
Other states have been worse than New York as far as like draconian measures to
For sure. For sure.
break the curve. Like New York's been bad, but New Jersey, California, Michigan immediately come to mind as
Right.
states that have more intense laws. Like California, they extended their lockdown until August
Right.
of whatever date. I forget the exact date, August something. And they have an order that put on masks, a strict order to put on masks for any reason leaving outside. New York City, it's kind of like at this point, I would say about 70% of the people are wearing masks. I haven't seen anyone get arrested in New York City for really anything, including probably things they should be arrested for. And I'm not even saying
Yeah.
COVID-19 related
Yeah.
things.
No, totally.
Um,
It's a little bit
um,
lawless right now. A little bit. You know,
but
but
it's
I digress. I think what's interesting about this, that kind of leads to a bigger topic that we want to talk about today, is like the effect of lockdowns, and how that relates to the number of cases, or like how well we're handling the virus itself. And actually, you pointed out a really good article by Time, talking about Japan, of all people. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about that?
yeah. So Japan they declared a state of emergency, and they did not go through with a lockdown. So the state of emergency was like essentially just shutting down schools and putting out like an advisory to shut down businesses at a certain hour and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
they never had a full shutdown like the U.S. did. And Japan, I mean, relative to the rest of the world, like economically they're suffering because their tourists they shut down their borders, so they
Right.
have a pretty big they have a pretty big tourism industry. There's a lot of tourists from China and other parts of Asia and America. There's a lot of people who go to Japan. There's a lot of cities like Kyoto,
Mm-hmm.
Osaka, Tokyo that people want to go to, and they are not getting any of that revenue. But as far as their COVID-19 rates, the spread has been far lower compared to just about everywhere else, it seems like. And they didn't have this lockdown. They had, I mean, I think some business owners were shutting down uh, just uh, just after certain hours, but there was nothing like we have here in the States. So I sent Danny this article the other day about how Japan may have beaten coronavirus without lockdowns or mass testing. That's the name of the article,
Mm-hmm.
and I found it interesting because they did not jump to they didn't adopt what a lot of people consider draconian measures to stomp out the curve. Uh, with the exception of closing schools down, they kind of just went ahead, business as usual. So you dive deep into this article, so I would love to hear what you have to say about it.
Sure, sure. And just to kind of add a little color to that, they're already looking to open up, right? So I believe that um, Tokyo and some other prefectures are already open, and then on Monday, the last four remaining regions are going to be exiting the the coronavirus. But a couple stats. So uh, there were no restrictions, as you said, placed on movement. Businesses and restaurants, and hairdressers, they all stayed open. They also didn't use any high tech, like fancy apps for contact tracing. They did it totally analog,
They
which
didn't
is,
spy on us. They didn't spy on their citizens.
well, I'm not going to comment on that. But I mean, I think it is ironic that Japan, one of the most technologically advanced societies, decided to do their contact tracing on paper.
They have more civil liberties than the U.S. Wow, what a surprise.
Well, we'll talk about some civil liberties or some liberties in general later. But um, where was I? Oh, they don't have a CDC, so they just don't have a national CDC. They have just only tested 0.2% of its population, which is one of the lowest among all developed countries. Their deaths were below 1,000, which is way lower than any G7 nation. Um, and in Tokyo, which is massively populated, they have dropped down to single digits for new cases on a day-to-day basis on most days. So I don't know if that's necessarily like accurate, but yeah, as Jeff Rose just points out, no test, no outbreak. But I guess that they've made the decision that they're just going to live with the virus and that they've done the best job that they can. And I mean, just from the numbers alone, they've had far fewer deaths. They're fairly, densely populated, and they haven't had as big of a health impact as other countries, namely the United States. And so I guess the question is, how did Japan contain the virus and completely disregard what other countries would call a playbook of social distancing and lockdowns and things like that? That's like kind of the main question that this article goes over. And I think the main point of this article says that there's no silver bullet. It was just there wasn't any one thing that they did better than everybody else. I think it was just like a combination of a bunch of shit. So this guy, Mikihito Tanaka, he's a professor of Waseda University, and he was one of the member of the experts in the country fighting the virus. He wrote, just looking at the death counts, you can say Japan was successful, but even experts don't know the reason. So like they're not even entirely certain. But there's this list of 43 possible reasons that have been floating around in the media. And it includes a bunch of random things like they have a culture of mask wearing. Like they've been wearing masks since way before that. It looks like CR is saying that as well. They also have a famously low obesity rate, right? So obesity does play a bit of a part in like the mortality for coronavirus. As you pointed out, Henry, they closed schools early. They actually jumped on that train pretty early, earlier than most countries. There's also this random claim that Japanese speakers emit fewer potentially virus-laden droplets when talking compared to other languages. Like they're just not as spitty when they talk, which is pretty interesting. And if you didn't know, that's one method of transmission is literally droplets coming out of your mouth when you're talking. That's what the 6 feet rule comes in place. But I think the biggest ones that they did a really good job with is contact tracing. So the government itself has been pretty criticized for being slow to implement new policies like locking down and things like that. But the contact tracers in Japan were like the saving grace here. So their public health centers have something like 50,000 public health.
Wait, quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is a contact tracer? Is it what it sounds like?
What does it sound like to you?
Something that traces people who cross each other's paths. Like is that like what is a contact tracer?
I mean, I guess in the broadest definition, you'd be correct. But basically, contact tracing is a method that's employed by virologists and people who deal with pandemics. And what they try to do is figure out, okay, you got like who's patient zero and like where have they been and who might they have infected. And like, if they find these quote clusters or groups of infections from a single location, like a club or a hospital, it makes it easier for them to inform people who might have been there to go ahead and like isolate yourself so that you don't continue to spread the disease. Right. And as I was saying, their public health centers have 50,000 public health nurses who are very experienced in infection tracing. And they've been doing this for a while. And in normal times, they would have been doing this for like the seasonal influenza, and like they've done it for SARS in the past and MERS. So they're very like experienced in this bet. And we're only now just hiring and training people to do contact tracing in this country.
I
So
guess when you live next to China, you have to be prepared for everything
yeah,
because, I mean, how many outbreaks have there been in the past 10 years?
there have been quite a few, quite
There
a
have been
few.
quite a few. So they always need to be on edge on what crazy disease is going to come
Come
either
out of
out of
there. Yeah.
a wet market or B, a possible secret lab,
I don't know about that secret labs.
alleged secret lab.
Allegedly. Yeah, I mean, look.
See, you see, in nature, animals aren't just hanging out with each other.
All right, Fauci. Um, all right. Well, I mean, there's been criticism, say, oh, like Japan doesn't have a CDC. Why do we need a CDC? But like their public health center is kind of a local CDC because they have these great contact tracers. So they're able to figure out where, not with utmost accuracy, but obviously pretty good because they did pretty good with COVID. And they're able to like isolate specific people that might have had contact with someone who was infected, and that does quite a bit for stopping the virus or flattening the curve, whatever you want to call it. But they've also, another interesting point is this like idea of a burning car. The article has this analogy in there that Japan seems to have latched onto a bit, and it has to do with the Diamond Princess. Do you remember the Diamond Princess, Henry?
Of course I do.
So
The ship that
yeah,
they just stopped. They quarantined the ship, and that's when everyone was like, what the hell is going on right here? Like
yeah,
that was like the first major news story. I mean, there were stories prior to that, but when the Diamond Princess was shut down, I remember talking about this on this podcast,
yep,
and you're the one who kind of first brought it up to me.
mm-hmm.
It was back when I thought that coronavirus wasn't uh, going to be a noteworthy news story to really talk about. It's kind of funny because I think this was in February.
Yeah,
I was out to dinner with my sister and my girlfriend, and they were both said, "Hey," because they were following coronavirus.
mm-hmm.
They were really into it, and they were like, "You should have us on to talk about coronavirus." And I was like, and I said, "We're never going to talk about coronavirus again in our podcast. We don't plan on talking about it ever again. Like I will make a strict policy never to talk about it again." And
First rule about bro history: you don't talk about
and
COVID.
can you blame me
No, no.
for being in that mindset of not being totally shocked about not knowing what day it is because we've been on lockdown for so long?
Yeah,
But
this kind of relates to this burning car thing, though. And I think the reason why a lot of us and a lot of people around the world didn't really care, or maybe not care, but like cared less, was because it was always somebody else's problem. It was China's problem. This is China's disease. It's fine. It's over there. But when the
well,
diamond
we had Ebola in New York City. We had an Ebola patient.
one
And I was like, we had
yeah.
one Ebola patient in New York City who was traveling around in the subways who went to Brooklyn Bowl.
Yep, he went
It was
bowling.
like a big bowling club
Yeah.
/ bar where they played live music,
Yeah,
and was in contact with a whole bunch of people that
right,
day.
right.
And
But that's contact
I
tracing.
still
there.
was just like, fuck it, I don't care.
I mean, that's contact tracing, right? So like
Yeah.
figuring out that guy had Ebola and he went to these places, and like you inform those people. Anyway, but the point though is that like around the world, when in the infancy of coronavirus, like everybody was like, oh, it's China's problem. It's not. It's a Chinese thing. It's fine. But when the Diamond Princess ended up, there's the cruise ship that was stricken with it, ended up making port in Japan, and Japan was like, nope, you're not coming in. You're staying on the ship. Like we'll treat you, but you're staying on the ship. For them, it was as if there was just like this burning car sitting outside their house, right? And for Japan specifically, it wasn't somebody else's problem. This was right on their doorstep. This was the burning car right outside. And this actually helped them out a lot. I mean, they got a lot of criticism about how they handled it, not letting people off the ship, and like it might have caused the spread of the virus within the ship to move faster. But what they were able to do with it was figure out how the virus spread, what were the symptoms, how do we test for it, and they got all this information super early on, right? And they were able to employ that in their own country and realized very quickly, like, shit, this could have ended up in our country. Like if we didn't catch this earlier, these people would have got off the ship and we would have had this big ass problem. And so from the cultural perspective in Japan, everybody was like took this very seriously very quickly because they had this first big outside of China case. And also, one thing to note is that the political leadership in Japan was super slow to do anything about it, but this kind of allowed a lot of the doctors and medical experts to come to the fore. Like the Japanese Anthony Fauci, stepped up and was like, "Yeah, we got to, do some stuff." And the stuff that they decided to do was the 3 Cs, which is no closed spaces, no crowded spaces, no close contact settings. So they didn't do like the stay 6 feet apart and stay in your house and never leave until, whatever. They took a more pragmatic approach to it. They were just like, go to the store, but like don't get super close to people.
And they put heavy border restrictions up.
That's right. And they immediately shut their border down. But Japan's kind of like historically known for isolating themselves.
It's interesting because Japan, that's been Japan's MO since
the Meiji Restoration,
since people settled there.
Yeah.
Japan has always had the ability, since it's an island nation, that it can just open up and shut down their borders at will.
Yep.
And throughout history, you always see them there'll be like 100-year period where they open their borders and then they'll go 100 years with their borders closed and then they'll open them back up and then they'll close them back up. They went through a 300-year closure in through the 1500s until Commodore Perry came over and forced them to open up their borders via gunboat
diplomacy. Yeah.
And then after they were like, oh shit, they were getting guns from the Portuguese and the Dutch because they were trading with the Portuguese, but then they put a stop to that because there were sitting too many missionaries up there.
Yeah, but they only traded with the Dutch and the Portuguese on one tiny little island all the way at the south. They were like, you can go on one island.
They traded with the Portuguese, but they put a stop to it because there were too many missionaries on board, and they hated Catholicism.
They were like, we don't like your Jesus.
And they hated Christianity.
Yeah.
So they would trade with the Dutch because the Dutch were secular compared to other European nations, so they felt a little bit more comfortable with them. But even when they did trade with them, they put them on some like you said, a restricted island.
Yeah, it was just like a small island all the way in the south, and like I think in some cases they didn't even let them get off the boat. They were like, just like put the ramp out, give us the stuff, we'll give you the money, and you can go away.
Yeah, exactly. Like people get delivery now. So
exactly.
Put it
at the door. Like, I'll pay you later.
When they realized what they've been missing out on for many years, such as like modern medical practices and mainly like high powered cannons, they're like, we need this stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff is actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
We'll take it. And then they became a colonial nation. Then they colonized all their neighbors.
Yep.
Until they ultimately lost World War II. But
a brief history of Japanese culture.
History and tentacle porn.
Speaking of tentacles, so another reason that Japan might have been doing a little bit better on the coronavirus outbreak than other countries is that we're starting to learn that there's a possibility that the virus strain that they had might have been different. So the researchers at Los Alamos National Laboratory in the U.S., they studied a bunch of different coronavirus variants in their database, and they found actually one strain of the virus that was spreading really, really heavily through Europe that had a lot of mutations, which was very, very different from the Asian version. And so that was according to the paper that they put out in early May. Those findings haven't been peer-reviewed yet, so take that with a grain of salt, and it needs a bunch more study. But there is the possibility that they just had a weaker strain as well. And I think that I mean, Japan wasn't perfect either. I mean, there were other Asian nations that did much better. As an example, Taiwan had just 7 confirmed deaths, and Vietnam had none. And Vietnam is literally on the border of China. So, they weren't perfect, but they did a much better job than a lot of countries, a lot of Western countries for sure. And it kind of asks a lot of questions, and should we have gone through a lockdown and things like that. But I think before you jump on the idea that that was the way to go, and no lockdowns, and we're suffering economically because of these lockdowns, and we shouldn't have done it. Look, we should have did the Japanese thing. Japan is also suffering a lot, like economically. Those loose lockdown protocols haven't protected the country from the economic impact of COVID-19. First of all, they had a really big impact already to start, from a sales tax hike last October that they just had. And they officially slid into a recession in the first 3 months of the year. But their tourist numbers, so you were pointing this out before, 99.9% plummet in tourist numbers in April after they shut their borders. I wonder where that 0.1% ended up being. But they were relying on tourism when they slid into a recession to help them get out of the recession, and then coronavirus. And just like a bunch of other countries, bankruptcies have risen sharply, and there just has been a general lack of demand in Japan. So, lockdown or not,
That's overall due to supply chain linkages
of
through
course. I
international
mean, I'm super
industries
pissed off because
around the world. Like,
yeah,
it has nothing to do with like what their policy was regarding coronavirus. That has to do with just destructions of industries and really just really large disruptions in supply chains. Like, that's why they're experiencing an economic downfall or downturn. But they're not doing the same thing. Like, they're not seeing the same type of extreme numbers that we're seeing in the United States right now. Like, the economic data that's coming out is nothing but insane.
right.
Like, the stock market is actually rebounding. The past couple of days, there have been some market rallies,
It's
but
all speculative trading because
it's
things are
all
starting to open up, though.
it's all the rallies have to do with just the fact that the market was down so low. It has really nowhere else to go but up, and
Wow.
people are starting to buy stocks because they're such a low market. But like, I don't think looking at the stock market is like even the best thing to do
Nope.
when trying to judge the health of an economy.
No, I mean, take a look at the unemployment numbers. I think we were up to
That's
40
the biggest thing.
million. 40
And people are
million.
investing in industries that they just know are getting Fed bailouts anyway.
Right,
So,
exactly. Remember, we told you to invest in Boeing and Raytheon.
yeah,
in
people
one of
are
our
like,
last
oh,
episodes.
oh, Boeing's getting billions of dollars. Let's put money into them. That's what Kevin O'Leary said
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
on CNBC. And they don't have over 20% unemployment right now. They don't have massive amounts of money printing going on. Like, they're not in trillions of dollars of debt like the United States is. So
They have different sets of problems, though. They have different sets of problems that's exacerbated by the coronavirus for sure. Because they could open up tourism again, but then they also run the risk of overloading their health system. Because they are very cognizant of the fact that they could have a second wave.
But I don't think at one point they were even close to overloading, like their healthcare system fracturing, anything like that. They were never. I saw
because they
a
did
lot of stuff where like they had beds available.
Mm-hmm.
You were able to go to a hospital.
Yeah, they weren't
There
lacking
people
for
dying on the
ventilators.
street.
Yeah,
Like, we're talking about minimal numbers compared to the United States.
Absolutely.
Or,
and we kind of talked about
country.
We talked about a lot of reasons why they had fewer cases and fewer deaths, right? So not to rehash all those reasons, but there were lots of different reasons.
A lot of culture reasons. Like, they eat healthier.
Right.
They're not fat
I mean,
fucks.
but one thing
They're
that's kind
not.
of crazy is that they have the world's oldest population, right? And
Yeah.
this affects old people a lot more, right? But because of contact tracing and like, mask wearing culture and like all the things that we just described for the last like 15 minutes, they were able to stave off like a very bad pandemic in their country. But they are not, like, their culture right now is not thinking, oh, phew, we dodged a bullet, we're good. Their officials are literally saying the phrase to people, live with the virus. And they recognize that Japan's approach has no possibility of wiping out the pathogen. They're working really closely with some folks on antiviral medication to try and like reduce some of those potential future deaths. But what the policymakers and the health experts in Japan are saying is that they are not prepared for a US style wave. Like, they kind of did dodge a bullet. Maybe they did all the right things, but if it hits like it hit here in Japan, they're fucked. And they recognize it. And they don't, and with the economic situation that they're in, being in a recession, starting even like just in the beginning of the coronavirus, they don't have the economic capital to like muster what we did in trillions of dollars of bailouts. They can't do that, So they're in a dangerous, precarious position right now, and they're preparing their country, and they're mentally they don't see this as a nothing burger. They see this as a big threat, and they're each taking precautions. Like, everybody in that country is taking precautions not to spread the infection, albeit it's a much more pragmatic approach, which is interesting. But they're not counting out. They're not counting on a second wave. They're very cognizant that can happen.
Did they bring up? Well, first of all, different strain. I feel
Yeah.
like someone just made that up. Like, it could be a different strain. I mean, it sounds like it could be a possibility, but is there any proof? That's just some
Yeah.
theory.
Yeah. I mean, at least there's a
That
paper
is a
that
different strain.
like I said, there was a paper that came out of the Los Alamos National Laboratory in the U.S. that studied a bunch of different versions of the virus, and they were able to show that the European version was heavily mutated and very different from the Asian version. So there is some legs to that. There's some scientific legs to that. It does
They
sound
were
like
able.
it does
They
sound
were
like a
able to.
conspiracy theory.
It sounds like someone like being like make an excuse for losing or something. Like, the only reason that we lost is because we played a better team in the first round or something like that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but they confirm that it's more dangerous than
Well,
the version.
it's
Or
this is new. So the paper just came out in May, right? So it still needs to be peer reviewed by other, like, that's how science works, right? You put out a paper, you have your findings, and then a bunch of other scientists look at your work and check it, right? That's what's kind of fucking cool about science and not politics.
well,
um,
did the paper? Well, sometimes a lot of times science can be politically influenced as well.
of course, but we're talking about just a virology lab, a national laboratory here in the United States, right?
Yeah, the act of science is not political, but
Right.
like, science can be used for political purposes and it's used for political purposes all the time.
Of course, but that's
Um,
what the peer review process, undermines, right? The peer review, like, you might have a bias, and you're trying to use data, cherry pick data to have, to do confirmation bias, right? So maybe there's like some, I don't know, some interest here in the United States that's trying to say that, oh, Japan's, lockdown only worked, Japan not locking down only worked because they had a weaker strain, right? Maybe that's the angle, maybe that's the bias there. But the point of this is that other scientists are going to go ahead and peer review this, and they're either going to say, yeah, you're right, or they're going to say, no, that's bullshit, and here's why. So we don't really know yet, but at least one respected laboratory in the U.S. has pointed to this conclusion. So we'll find out more in the future, I suppose.
if only we got the easy COVID-19.
Yeah, we
Um,
didn't get the easy one.
did this
Um,
article did this article ever go? I forget. Did this article ever go into how um, people from the West, America and Europe, are hanging on to each other all the time? Like, kissing and hugging each other and shaking hands. Like they
No,
don't
it
do that in
didn't.
Japan. They bow.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Like you
true.
have to
Yeah,
think
they
they're
don't even shake hands.
so
You're right. Yeah.
a lot of the spreading in the United States has been in gatherings, like social gatherings,
Hmm.
parties, uh, places of worship
Right.
where you're shaking hands. Like a lot of places, a lot
A
of the
lot of
spread
touchy
is
feely. A lot of
a
touchy.
lot of touchy feely type stuff.
Yeah.
Like a party, like someone would go to a party and then everyone at that party would get it because people are shaking hands with everyone, they're
Right.
saying goodbye to everyone,
Hugs,
and
kisses, so on and so
and
forth.
they kiss the people kiss each other all the time
Mm-hmm.
in Europe and the
Mm-hmm.
United States when they say goodbye, like, oh, goodbye, mwah, mwah.
Exactly.
um
Yeah.
can't wait to see, oh, how are you, Michelle, mwah. You
Mwah,
look
have some
great in that
Corona.
shirt.
Mwah.
Is that mink, Michelle?
No,
Mwah.
it's Corona. Mwah.
um but they don't do that there,
No.
and I'm fine with putting an end to that whole
Yeah.
practice
Are
because I think it's awkward
you
to
ready? You ready to start
kiss
bowing
people and
when you
do
go
the
to a
kiss.
bar and you
That's what
meet
I do
people?
now.
You
That's what
bow.
I do. That's I bow. I say I bow now,
Hmm.
or do the Hindu thing where you do the thing with your hands. I forget what it's called and how the motion goes, but either of those two are acceptable. I think we should adopt better salutations or greetings from different cultures, and I think bowing definitely is better than handshaking.
Personally,
It's more
I
respect,
like the sup yo.
or saluting,
you
or
know.
salute everyone. What would you rather do, salute or bow? I think
Nah, I
bowing is a
want
little better because
sup.
saluting, I feel, is a
One of these. You nod your head up and go sup.
no. That's thuggish. That's just like
Yeah, so what?
I barely acknowledge you. Like that's
Sup.
the body language of someone's like, I'm a hard ass and I'm letting you live. Like that's what that is. Um,
the
I think the bow is the best way to go forward with how we say hi, and I think I'll do that for the rest of my life.
All right.
Like done with shaking hands, but
Not touching you anymore.
not because of the virus concern, just because I honestly don't like touching random strangers' hands.
Yeah, I feel that. I
I
feel
don't know.
that.
Do you like doing that? Do you like having to like be in a social situation where you like were with a bunch of people, but there was one person you said maybe one or two words to and didn't really have any conversation or connection at all. And you're like, do I shake this person's hand? Like, I don't know this person's name, but I have to say goodbye and shake this person's name and say, oh, nice to meet you. Uh, Next time we'll talk more. I just, the bow, I think you can get them all done. All the goodbyes done at once, and it's honorable. And I think that we should start adopting that for the rest of for the rest of humanity. I don't know
Bows
if you
for president 2020.
keep on adopting other things from Japan,
Yeah.
like like
Like
like
tentacles.
like tentacles. Yeah, tentacles. Bowing and tentacles.
All right. Let's shift gears here. Yeah. Want to talk about something else?
Okay, let's go to. So you want to talk about this Twitter thing with Trump?
Yep. Yep. So, DLDR, for those folks who didn't actually read Trump's tweets, Trump on Wednesday threatened social media companies, specifically Twitter, but all social media companies, with some new regulation or even shutting down because they added some fact checks to his tweet. And what's funny
Take
about
that, Trump. Your fact check now, Donald Trump. Kofefi.
Hamburgers was my favorite one that he said.
Burn.
Hamburgers. So what's funny about this is that he tweeted this threat. So like he's threatening Twitter on Twitter, which I think is meta as fuck. So one thing you got to know is that the president cannot like unilaterally regulate or close social media companies. It's not something he can do.
Trump probably thinks he can.
Oh, he absolutely
I can
does.
just take him out of business.
Just close him down. Shut him off. Nobody
Just
likes
turn
it
it
anyway.
up. Just turn it. Just unplug him. Good tech.
I mean, this would require like an act by Congress to get actually anything done. But I guess the whole argument behind this is that um, on the one side, I could just read some of his tweets. He says, "Yeah, tech giants silence conservative voices. We strongly regulate or close them down." So he suggested that we strongly regulate or close them down before we can ever allow this to happen. And then he goes on to say in another tweet, like, big action to follow. And in another one, he's like, big tech was going absolutely crazy. Stay tuned. So this is him like going on a fucking Twitter rant like 4 a.m. or whatever, talking about this. So in the tweet, the specific tweet that Twitter fact check, he was talking about an unsubstantiated claim, which was that mail-in voting would be a free-for-all. I'm quoting him now. Would be a free-for-all on cheating, forgery, and the theft of ballots. So that's what he says. That's his opinion. And under the tweet, there's a link now, and it reads, "Get the facts about mail-in ballots," and it guides you to like a place where you can see a bunch of news stories about that. And Trump obviously is accusing Twitter of interfering with the 2020 presidential election. Go figure. And what's another really funny point about this is that his campaign manager, his guy's name is Brad Parscale, he said that there is a clear political bias, I'm hard quoting here, that led to the campaign pulling all of their advertisements from Twitter months ago. So funny point about that is that Twitter actually banned all political advertising since last November anyway, so that this has nothing to do with it. So a bunch of Trump allies are saying that social media companies in general, tech companies, are liberal-leaning, and they are specifically targeting conservatives for censorship. On the other hand, Trump critics are saying that social media like knowingly allows Trump to post fake news and other bullshit to confuse voters, and that they have a responsibility to make sure that he doesn't get away with that.
Well, I agree with Trump. So he's absolutely right, and social media is unquestionably liberal, like left-leaning biased, but not the progressive, like not. It's not like it's a bias towards like that mainstream kind of like really weak kind of typical liberal type bias where everyone wants to join ship on really easy to condemn type of topics, and score social points with each other. Like that's social media in a nutshell. They 100% have left-leaning employees, and they 100% are harder on conservative accounts than liberal accounts. Like I have, it is way harder. But I'll tell you one thing: conservatives don't have it worse than other groups. The people who have it the worst are libertarians. Libertarians get censored for fucking anything.
Yeah.
Now, and it's honestly the censorship that happens on conservative networks is child play compared to people who are more libertarian or paleo conservative. Like the type of conservative ink is 100% promoted all the time. You can find Ben Shapiro anywhere. He pops up on my Facebook 24/7. They'll be like, oh, well, it's called Boy Scouts. That pops up on my Facebook every single day at Ben Shapiro. Like, Ben Shapiro burns 14-year-old girl in high school on gender studies.
Yeah.
Well, my child wouldn't be studying lesbian dance theory. Nelson Mandela was a terrorist. That pops up in my feed all the time. But what you don't see is someone like Ron Paul or Jacob Hornberger or Dan McAdams, who was removed from Twitter from calling Sean Hannity retarded. And either that was too close to home, or for some reason, Facebook or Twitter, this was Twitter, decided to can him. Why? You know how many people call Sean Hannity things that are way worse than calling him retarded? There's so many insults to go around, and they selectively chose Daniel McAdams. So, yeah, so conservatives definitely do get censored more than liberals, but it doesn't hold a candlestick to people who are really presenting unpartisan type positions that go against both mainstream parties because they're out there alone. They don't have big money behind them like a lot of mainstream conservative networks and mainstream liberal networks. We don't have Sheldon Adelsons, so it's a
Or
lot
George
harder
Soros
for
is.
or George Soros's or Sheldon Adelson, like two sides of the flame, the two
Same coin.
sides of the same coin. You
Yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
one fucking two mega billionaires who invest in their own like
Political
crazy
ideologies.
social political visions.
Right.
Um,
Well,
but
look, I mean, obviously, I disagree with you. I don't think that
well,
they're targeting conservatives or libertarians specifically. I think that if they are censoring certain things, especially when we're talking about specifically this tweet, like I think it's fair to be like, "Yo, that's bullshit. That's not true."
on a technical level,
Like,
on a technical level, what they do is they censor topics.
right?
So they have a lot of times it's bots doing the censoring because you
Exactly.
cannot police the entire
It's
internet,
impossible. Yeah,
and
there's
basically the
billions
entire
of tweets
internet
go out. Right.
are using these programs. So they're policing like so. For instance, our YouTube channel that we have right here,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty rare that an audio podcast, well, at least from what I've seen from other people, that an audio podcast has a lot more traction than a video podcast. Usually there's more traffic going in on video. There's more searchability. There are more chances for your show to be found on something on YouTube because
Mm-hmm.
of recommendation engines and things like that.
Right.
Because we talk about Syria, automatically it forbids us from being recommended because we just talk about Syria on a frequent basis.
Right.
So if I type in Syria into I had some tool that showed me that it said Syria will not be recommended or monetized content, like just saying the word fucking Syria.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about actual like real kind of foreign policy issues will not get you circulated or will not help you
Right,
go
but
viral.
to that point,
Go viral.
that's
What
topical,
we
right?
do.
So
Saying
it's
something
not
like it, then
that's topical though. That's not like specifically singling out a conservative. It's like literally anybody who says Syria. You know what I mean? Like because that's the way that the algorithms do this, right? Now, I think specifically for this tweet, there was content managers that were like, "No, we're not going to let you say bullshit about mail-in ballots because you're using our platform to misinform
but
voters."
are they selectively just doing that on Trump, or are they going to do that with everyone?
Well,
When
actually,
Obama said, or when
yeah,
Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama says something stupid online, and
yeah,
believe me, they say plenty of dumb stuff.
totally. So,
They are they going to fact check them when like
mhm,
are they going to selectively use that for Trump and Trump's like closest allies in the political sphere?
for
Yeah,
sure.
probably not going to go after people who have maybe 100,000 followers, but they're going to go after people with millions of followers who are
Mhm.
close to Trump, like his son, like his daughter, like his campaign
Yeah, I mean,
manager.
listen, I fully expect them to go after. Let's just use Barack Obama
Like
as an
you
example.
cannot
If Barack
say that the
Obama put
social
out some
media
bullshit,
is not
I can, I can,
is
I
not
can.
overwhelmingly left wing. Like
No,
you cannot make that argument, dude.
no,
I go on Twitter, the first 20 things that pop up in my feed are fucking things about LeBron James making some crazy social statement mocking Trump.
that's just
It's
the way that
like
the algorithm works. It's
I
just
have to
it's just
look
what's
at
trending. That
5 left-wing
they're not
articles before I
curating.
get to none. I don't get to any right-wing article. Like maybe I'll land on a Fox News thing, but I will never be
Because those things
nothing
don't
will ever be
trend.
served.
Because those things don't trend,
Those
Henry.
don't trend. Why? There's half the country voted for Trump.
Yeah, but that
Should
doesn't mean that
trend.
half the country is trending on some conservative article that you'd like to see.
But half the country supports these policies. Like
It
half
doesn't
the
matter
country
if half
conservative
it doesn't matter if half the country
or
supports
more
a certain
conservative than the
policy.
other half.
We're talking about content here on the internet. The
And
content that the
there's
content
demand for
that
that content. Like
no,
these people are on the internet as well.
you're
Every
doing a
single
chicken and the egg
hashtag
here,
that
Henry.
trends is always like Trump messed up again, or fire Trump, or Trump lied.
You're doing a
Like
chicken
something.
and the egg here, Henry. What you're trying to say is that I would like to see more conservative content, right? But that's not what starts first. You put the content on the Twitter. You put content on Twitter, and if a lot of people catch on to it, it starts to trend. If a lot of people don't, it doesn't trend. It just so happens that more liberal shit ends up trending. That's all. It's an algorithm. A human being isn't saying, you know what, you're going to see this one, you're going to see this one, you're going to see that. Would take fucking way too long.
I'm
They're a
telling you,
tech company, not
it's
a content producer. Like they're not fucking BuzzFeed, you know? BuzzFeed would do that, right? BuzzFeed would curate specific content for you to look at, right? Other publications would specifically curate content for you to look at. This is a algorithm that's predicting what's being talked about the most, and that's what we're going to serve up. No human being is behind this. So I don't think that people are virally trending conservative ideas on Twitter. That's what it is. But some conservative ideas do trend, and when they do, you'll see them. That's the whole
dude,
point.
there is documentation of people like Google. I know this is not Twitter, but Google is pretty big too. They own YouTube. People at Google talking about how they're going to prevent Trump from winning. Like they can't let a Trump situation happen again. Like Project Veritas, they did like a undercover job where they had someone go and they filmed this guy.
Mm-hmm.
There was I can talk to you from firsthand experience. I've worked in a tech reality in a media company before once in my lifetime, and they absolutely there's a 100% very very mainstream corporate liberal bias in those buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're 100% verified, incredibly corporate liberal bias from the ground up,
Mm-hmm.
from the top down. Excuse me. So it's the vast majority of everyone in those offices are very very corporate liberal. And I'm not referring to like the like kind of the very principled leftist types. Like I'm not referring to that type of ideology. I'm talking about like corporate liberal types who encourage you to vote Democrat and things like that, who have active conversations about uh, doing social engineering on the internet, where they they endorse they it's not that they endorse left-leaning content, but they condemn anything that is connected to, I guess, modern day either conservatism, libertarianism, or I guess even like really progressive stuff as too extreme to be shown on content. Because they'll censor left-wing stuff too. They'll be like, oh, that's too left-wing, that's too left extreme. Uh, so it's not just conservatives, but I'm just saying there's 100% human bias behind that, man. I could definitely speak to that.
All right. Well, look, we're not gonna end up on the same side of this argument. I think, and that's fine. You know, we can agree to disagree there. But I think where to kind of loop back to your initial point a few minutes ago about libertarians getting the shittiest end of the stick, I think this kind of brings up a really like almost
Anti-war people get the shittiest end of the stick. So anti-war libertarians, anti-war progressives, they get the shittiest end of the stick because they had the most to say about foreign policy.
Mhm.
They had the most to say about a lot of these fucked up wars. So they get the shit end of the stick when it comes to internet censorship.
I want to stick with libertarians for a moment because it goes with this meme that I wanted to show. So I actually I sent it to you in the Skype chat if you want to look at it. I know you're not looking at the live chat here, but are libertarian um, ideas, right? The fact that they are a private institution, right? So you can believe, Henry, that the social media companies are biased and and liberal. But at the end of the day, they're a private company, and they can do whatever the fuck they want, right? But at the same time,
it's their platform. But the thing that you have to look at is whether they're being subsidized or whether they're working with government on any type of contract, or they have an incentive or an attachment to any government agency. For example, Amazon works with government. They work on
Amazon's also not a social media company.
They're not a social media company, but they're a large tech company that does provide that is subsidized by the government through government contracts. So you have to ask yourself: does Facebook and Twitter, do they have any programs? Are they subsidized by these government by the government? Are they is the government doing anything to limit their competition or keep them from having a monopoly on the spaces that they own, or that they basically have almost total market concentration on between Twitter and Facebook? Like, most people, pretty much everyone who has a Twitter has a Facebook. So they have total market concentration. Like there is zero market concentration. Like it is just dominated by some players. Now, it's their platform. They have the right to do what they want. Like, I mean, they can do what they want, but if they have harsh censorship, then people are eventually going to adopt other platforms. Like, here's a good example: Joe Rogan.
Yeah, he just got a huge deal with Spotify.
Is leaving YouTube.
Yeah,
he signed a huge deal for $100 million with Spotify, and I guess Spotify is starting to take podcasting a little more serious if they're throwing that type of change behind Joe Rogan.
Right. We're on Spotify. You can listen to us there too.
Yeah, we're on Spotify. Granted, Joe Rogan is the biggest podcaster probably in the world right now.
Yeah, on the planet.
On the planet. But I mean, he left YouTube. So if more people are going to leave these platforms, influencers leave these platforms, their audiences are eventually going to follow them. But
and that's kind of the beauty of the free market here, right? So if Twitter decides that they want to, according to you and many other people, specifically censor conservatives, they're welcome to leave, and that's that.
And as far as targeting conservatives, it honestly just knowing the type of people who work at most of these companies, they do. Most of the people who work at these companies are just smart engineer dorks, like most of them. But there's way more kind of corporate liberals in these companies than any type of like conservative group. Like,
doesn't matter. They're not the government.
I'm just the internal influence leans way more left than right. Most right wing people in these big tech companies are afraid to come out as right wing.
Well, so check this. This brings me to my next point that I wanted to talk about, because what we talked about happened on Wednesday, just happened today, Thursday. Was that Trump signs an executive order specifically targeting these social media companies. He accuses them of having unchecked power. He's basically trying to limit the company's legal immunity for how they moderate content posted by users, which could increase political and financial pressure on people like Twitter, Facebook, Google, and other Silicon Valley giants. By basically allowing people or other entities to sue them, and also to allow other regulatory reviews. And so basically what's going on here is that he wants to pull on this specific law. And I'm trying to find the place in my notes that I wrote this down. I kind of lost myself in our conversation there. There's this law, it's Section 230 of, what the fuck is the name of the law? Come on, help me here, Henry. Tell me I'm going to have to fucking grab my... got it. So, okay. It's called Section 230 of a 1996 federal law called the Communications and Decency Act. And what this does is it specifically protects internet companies from lawsuits and other liability for moderating content posted by users or for the content itself. What this means is that they are not a publication. If you're a newspaper, if you're the New York Times, and you publish something that is knowingly false, like you do it on purpose, you can be sued, right? You can be sued for defamation. You can be sued for a bunch of shit, right? And so that's why papers generally do not knowingly publish bullshit. Now, they might unknowingly publish bullshit, and then they have to issue a retraction. Otherwise, they're going to get sued, right? But this isn't the case for people like Twitter or Facebook or Google or whatever.
Tell that to the New York Times leading up to the Iraq War.
Well, they have to issue retractions. You know what I mean?
They had to issue an apology for,
sorry. My bad.
Sorry that all the articles that came out about Saddam Hussein, everything that came from Judith Miller, just was made up.
Yeah, it was bullshit.
It was all made up stuff. Everything from William Safire and Judith Miller for a good 3-year period was completely just lies. Like they just it was fantasy.
Right. So I mean, the point here is that, you know, Twitter and Facebook, they're not the New York Times. They're not a paper. They're not a publisher. And under Section 230, they are protected from, you know, say a user or an entity suing them because some idiot on their platform decided to write some bullshit about them, right? They're not liable for that because it's just user generated content. So they don't have to moderate they don't have to moderate anyone. They can choose to moderate. That's their choice because they're a platform and not a and not a publisher. And they're choosing to moderate this specific tweet by Trump, and that's their choice as a platform. However, a lot of people want to pull this Section 230, right? And so what's kind of fucked up about this is that this could backfire on Trump pretty bad. You know, so if these companies get legal threats, you know, on their user-generated content, they might actually end up blocking more than what they're doing now. They might censor more than what they're doing now. One interesting thing that they probably would end up censoring is right before signing this executive order, Trump retweeted a video of a supporter saying the only good Democrat is a dead Democrat. Of course, he backs himself up by saying, I meant that in a political sense, but I think he can eat a bag of dicks in a political sense. And honestly, you know, that is the exact kind of content that would immediately get censored. Why? Because, you know, whether you mean it in a political sense or not, Twitter isn't going to take the risk that you aren't calling for death to Democrats. They're not going to take that risk. They don't want to get sued by the Democrats. They don't want to get sued by anybody.
Dude,
right?
Here's the thing, though. I know that I want to try to get past this argument because I know we may not come to heads to this, but a lot of this stuff is selectively enforced. So I see I've seen some Twitter accounts that are blatantly racist against white people. Now, I'm not into this whole, like, I try to stay out of this, like, identity politics stuff because I'm just very turned off by it. But I see a lot of very blatant, like, racist accounts towards white people, which are just like, I was like, wow.
I see an equal number of them racist against black people or Spanish people or Jews, and I see a lot of them.
Those accounts are removed from Twitter. They're removed. I'm just saying that they're selectively chosen to be removed.
No, I still see them. I see a lot of them.
Have you seen? You know how many people are purged from Twitter? How many personalities are how many accounts are typically purged? Like, everyone is a conservative. Like, all the big purging list.
I think that's honestly that's hyperbole, man.
I don't even like a lot of these people.
I'm not saying that you like them. I think this is hyperbole. This is hyperbole. Unless you can give me a concrete number and percentage of people that have been purged, and also show that they weren't purged, that they weren't in violation of one of their terms of conditions. If you can show, if I can see numbers on, I'm very serious about this. I'm not saying that you're wrong. All I'm saying is that I cannot agree with you until I see data that proves that these are selectively targeting and that the ratio of conservatives that get banned is much higher than non-conservatives or even liberals, And I also want to control for anyone who is literally breaking their. I want to see a liberal breaking the terms of service, like a number of liberal accounts breaking the terms of service and not getting deplatformed, versus the number of conservatives that aren't breaking the terms of service that were. Like, that's the only way that I'm going to agree with this. And I don't think you have the numbers, and I honestly don't think anyone has those numbers right now. Maybe Twitter, but we're probably not going to find that out. So, like,
Well,
I agree. We're not going to agree on this point.
It's tough to get that data, because then you'd have to categorize people as conservative or not when they may just lean in some sort of way. So you're asking someone who's doing these statistics,
and that kind of hurts your argument too.
Categorize people as conservative, but there's certain
that kind of hurts your argument too, though, because what you're saying is that I think that conservatives are being targeted at a greater percentage for censorship or deplatforming than non-conservatives. But you're also saying that, well, we can't really get that data because then we'd have to categorize them as conservatives. It's like you can't have both. You either need to say we can categorize these people as conservative and they've been deplatformed at a greater clip than non-conservatives, or you have to say that, there is no data that suggests that this is true. Maybe there's some other options in between that I haven't thought of just yet. So I don't want to present a false choice. And I agree that we're probably not going to agree on this topic. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make overall in this general sense is that I think we can agree that a lot of people on both sides want to get rid of Section 230. This is actually quite bipartisan for completely different reasons, but actually very, very bipartisan to get rid of this. And I think it's probably a bad thing. So as an example, Representative Matt Gaetz, he's a Florida Republican. I'd like to label him as a conservative. He says, if you're going to opine as to the truth or falsity of that which is put on your platform for the sake of its viewers, you do not need the protections of Section 230. So TLDR, if you're going to pick sides about truth or falsehoods on specific tweets, namely Trump's, then you can't be protected by Section 230. Okay, fine. I don't agree, but fine. But then on the other side, obviously Trump doesn't want this, right? So there's a big one. But on the other side, on the Democratic side, Joe Biden has called for completely revoking 230. And he says that social media companies are propagating falsehoods that they know to be false, and it's totally irresponsible. Nancy fucking Pelosi said that social media companies, our business model is to make money at the expense of truth and facts, right? And there are a bunch of people on both sides right now that are all saying we need to get rid of Section 230 because either you're attacking conservatives or because you're propagating falsehoods. So you're fucked if you do and you're fucked if you don't if you're a social media company. And in general, the point I want to make here is if Twitter or Facebook or any of these other companies lose the protections and are now treated as publishers like a newspaper, it's going to cause them to censor a lot more. Like, they're going to censor fucking everything. Why? Because they are a business. They don't want to get sued. And they're just going to just censor everything. Literally everything's going to be PG or bust because they don't want to get sued. Point blank. So we're walking down a really interesting path here, right? So if you're trying to say that Twitter is blocking your First Amendment right for free speech because I'm a conservative and I want to say conservative things, then you don't want 230 to get pulled. You just don't. It doesn't make sense for 230 to get pulled for you. And if you are a liberal and you think that Twitter and all these other places are, propagating bullshit, you don't want 230 to get pulled because they're just going to pull everything. It's not going to be a fun platform for anyone anymore.
Well, it's going to become BuzzFeed. It's going to become BuzzFeed, like really easy, kind of like lowbrow, advertisement friendly type content that will not offend anyone. And no, I don't. I agree that. I agree with that. If it did become a publisher, then it would take way stronger strides to act as an editor essentially, because they can't be they don't want lawsuits.
Right. I mean,
A,
you can
a point.
guarantee that Trump is going to get immediately banned from Twitter if they're a publisher, and not as a reaction to losing that protection, but literally because Trump would be a liability to them, all the shit that he says, you know, and that the same goes for fucking liberals and shit. Like, literally anything that could be even remotely seen as incendiary or inflammatory or defamatory, they're going to pull it. They're just going to pull it and they're going to ban you, and that's that.
So I just want to add one more point, and I think you'll agree with this point I'm going to make about social media companies. Their number one interest, besides, now I just went on a rant about like having a left leaning bent. At the end of the day, I want to make this clear. I don't believe that these social media companies are ideologically driven at all. They're not. They're not. They're profit driven.
Yep.
And
Totally
most of their moderation and most of the censorship that they do is based off creating a user experience. It's about their interface and having people stay on the platform. So that is what dictates their moderation process in the long run.
For sure.
Like, what do they think? What processes? How would they enforce their TSA to keep as many people on the website as humanly possible? So they're not thinking of your free speech. They're thinking of
their bottom line,
and their traffic at the end of the day.
100%.
So I don't know. Can you come to me on the middle with that?
Yeah.
Now, sometimes
I'm with you. 100%.
Sometimes that comes to having a stricter or in a subjective stance,
right?
Stricter enforcement of their TSA towards conservatives, because what they see as a lot of things that conservatives say, especially in regards to things like immigration and gun rights, and immigration and gun rights would probably be one of the two things. Maybe gay marriage and controversial wedge issues that people want to kill each other.
Is that still a wedge issue? That's
what?
An old wedge issue. Gay marriage has been around for a while now.
I mean,
is that still a thing conservatives are complaining about?
No, did I say gay marriage?
Yeah.
Did I say that?
Yeah.
No. Well, I didn't mean that. Conservatives, that was a wedge issue back in the day, that the majority of the leadership of the Democratic Party was on the opposite side as where they are right now. But they immediately switched once the poll numbers switched. So like Joe Biden, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, your favorite Democratic congressman.
They evolved, okay?
Every single one of them was not for gay marriage only like about 5 years ago. They all just like, we just our thoughts evolved. Like we finally realized that, we were.
Hey man, all joking aside, I think the culture of like, if being wrong is bad, needs to go away. I think people need to start being like, all joking aside, like putting aside this particular issue, like if you truly do learn new facts and it changes your mind, that's not a bad thing, right? Like, in truth. And that's what I hope that people who listen to our show or watch it.
The point I'm trying to make about these Democratic senators is that they switched on this issue because of the poll numbers. The public was by and large in favor of it, or at least the majority of the country was in favor of it. They didn't have some like empathy towards gay people.
Yeah,
or towards gay marriage.
You could totally make that argument. I could also make the argument that they were always for gay marriage, but politically it wasn't good for them, so they on the books they were against
it. It's even worse.
Yeah,
so,
and that's a political issue.
For it.
Yeah, you're morally for it. You're politically against it until it politically became expedient to do it. Right. It doesn't make it any better, but it's just a different
it makes
outlook.
It even worse probably, because at least if you're not for it, they're just they're politicians who don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
They do whatever is going to keep them in power, because no one really gives two shits about gay marriage unless you're fucking really crazy. Like I never, even before we changed our we changed our laws
Before
regarding
we
gay marriage.
evolved.
Like I never thought about it. Like I never spent more than like a minute thinking about it. I was just always like, yeah, sure, why not? Like why can't
Whatever.
gay people get
Yeah.
married? Like I don't care. Like let them get married. Like that was always been my position. Um, Unless you're like a super crazy even theocratic type, um, maybe you have a different opinion, but most people are not, don't want the state
Most
to
people don't
enforce
feel
that. Most
strongly
people,
about that issue, is what you're trying to
yeah,
get at.
most people don't really care about that issue because most people have gay friends or gay people in their lives, and they're like, I don't want my friend, I don't want my uncle or cousin or or whatever to not have that, right? And I think when more people started coming out as gay, then that was more people were like, oh, like I actually have a couple of gay people in my life. I
That I
want the
care
best
about and that I don't
that I
want.
care about,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
that. So um, I guess the point I was trying to make, man, I completely lost it.
Yeah, we went
Uh,
off the rails a little bit.
went off the rails with that. All right, let me just get back to the moderation, to the
Yep.
user experience. The main thing that they care about is creating a good user experience. Now, I think with I don't think there's like some. I don't think their ideological is the engine to how they conduct business or how they enforce their TSA. But I certainly think that the environment within the culture of those countries influences it greatly. And so I'll just say with that.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll leave it with
I
that.
agree. They follow the money. Whatever they think is going to make them money is what they're going to do. And if that means that they're going to censor Trump on a tweet about whether or not mail-in ballots are voter fraud, then they're going to do that. And if it tomorrow it's something else that's against Democrats, then they're going to do that.
And
It's
the reason why a lot of like libertarian issues or like libertarians or let's just say progressive on the other end, let's say anti-war type people like myself, uh, who we're set. I think a lot of times the things that we talk about or the things that we're concerned about. A lot of it is so esoteric that a lot of people don't really follow
yeah.
what we're saying.
Yep.
So if I said to you something that kind of was really eye opening. I was talking to these liberal New York City Democrats
Mm-hmm.
who really hated Donald Trump. It was right. It was around the same time, 2017. They hated Donald Trump. Pretty much every single talking point you hear on MSNBC was kind of like they're bird chirping to each other. And I was like, all right, I just never talked politics with them. They were nice enough guys. And one day I was brought up and I'm like, hey guys, man, that war in Yemen's fucking terrible. Like, I can't believe like this is. I was bringing up the war in Yemen,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, What are you talking about?" They're like, "What do you mean? Like, what do you mean war in Yemen?" They had no idea what the hell I was talking about. I'm like, the cholera outbreak. Like, there's been a war going on
You didn't
since
hear about the famine, like
2015,
yeah.
really 2012. There's a famine going on. There's
Uh-huh.
children starving to death. There's people being slaughtered. There's school buses being targeted. And
Mm-hmm.
they're like, and Trump supporting these people. Trump supporting the Saudis who are doing this. I mean, there's even accounts of them in the planes. And they're like, what are you talking about? We don't know anything about it. And I'm like, hey, man, I'm giving you a layup if you hate Trump so much and I'm giving you a layup to slam dunk on him, and you're not
Right.
even taking it because
Yeah.
it's something that like most people don't really care about, like
Mm-hmm.
which I've realized over the years, like they just don't
They
people
don't
don't
get
give a
it.
shit.
Yeah.
Uh, it's not they don't get it; it's just they don't give a shit unless it directly affects them. The Iraq War was something else because uh, you could see the spiral of the economy. You can see the debt ceiling. You can attribute like profits and losses that are expenditures that were used for this war, and you knew people who either either if you didn't have a relative or a friend who died in Iraq, you certainly very well
You heard of it.
probably knew
Yeah.
someone or heard someone.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you could say the
So it
same thing
was.
about COVID. Like COVID was this Chinese problem not too long ago until it became our problem. So I mean, yeah, I think it's a little narrow minded. It's a little selfish, but like not everybody can be a geopolitical nerd like us. So, so sometimes I'm a little bit more forgiving
I know
on a lot of
everyone,
those
not
fronts.
everyone's going to be interested in this stuff. I completely understand that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with not having an interest in this stuff. Like, it's if everyone was just interested in like international politics and things like that, then we wouldn't have all these great inventions in our life. Like,
Hmm.
who would feed the world? You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
everyone was a geopolitical analyst.
Yeah.
Uh, but I do wish that more people had at least a mile. I wish people had more of an interest in these types of topics than the lowbrow type politics that happens on the corporate news press.
Right.
Like, if we were dominated by Russiagate for years. For 3 years, we were dominated by this story. It consumed every single media outlet's content, like just Russiagate, Russiagate, Russiagate. And meanwhile, all of this other stuff was going on. No one really cared to talk about it. No one really cared to talk about the wars going on in Syria. No one really cared to talk about the war going on in Yemen. No one really cared to talk about actually true cases of corruption. And it's just kind of discouraging. It's kind of a bummer when when that information is not getting passed. But one of the compliments that we do receive about this podcast, and this is probably like the thing that kind of warms my heart when I hear it, and is when people are like, I wasn't really interested in a lot of the topics that you talk about, but now I am really interested in it. So I'm glad that this show rubs off on some people. Like, that makes it. I'm glad this show makes you more interested in the stuff that we're interested in.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can agree with that,
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
because I wasn't always interested in this stuff either. I mean, I was kind of always was, but I took a break from being interested in it for a couple of years, and it was I got back into it from other uh, people who were following this stuff and spoke about it passionately.
Hmm.
So it's cool
Paying
to
it
hear
forward
stuff,
now. Yeah.
paying it forward. But we had another stuff I wanted to talk about. It's getting kind of late in this podcast, so I think we'll save this for another episode.
All
But
right.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Obamagate.
I really wanted to talk about that too.
Um,
Next show for sure.
you want to talk about that next show? We want to talk
Yeah.
about when it's. I feel like it will still be relevant. Obviously, it's going to be relevant, but I wanted to talk about what was going on with. I wanted to put my best foot forward in explaining uh, what Obamagate is, because there's a lot of confusion, and I wanted to talk about Mike Flynn, um, but I think that will take another hour and a half at the very least to talk about. So let's put a pen in this. And I may disagree with you, but I'll die for your right to say it. How's that quote say? How's that Voltaire quote go?
Something like that.
I may disagree with you, but I'll defend. I'll give my life for
I'll
you.
defend your right to say it or some shit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. At least as we have that common ground. All right. Let's end this show. And everyone, I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed a little bit more of a sparky episode where Danny and I disagreed more than usual. There's some other episodes that you can find if this is your first time listening. And make sure that you rate and review the podcast, and give it a 5 stars if you're on iTunes. If you're on the YouTube channel, subscribe to it. If you're listening on the audio version, we do a YouTube live stream on YouTube, so you can check it out live as we're doing it. And yeah, do you want to leave us with?
Actually, CR helped us out with that quote. It's, I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it.
Is that Voltaire?
That's Voltaire.
I always thought it was Voltaire. It is Voltaire?
Yeah. Well, all right.
Voltaire, dude. Voltaire.
All right, Voltaire.
Peace.